Hey everyone, my name is Shanice and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be discussing Normal People by Sally Rooney, published in 2019, and I will be seeing how it compares to the TV show. I made a similar video last week where I compared the novel Conversations with Friends with the recent TV adaptation on Hulu, shared my thoughts, whether or not I thought it worked as a TV show, whether it didn't, and I had a lot of fun filming it. In that video, I mentioned how I just had this sort of urge to reread some of Rooney's other works because of how much I adored the book Conversations with Friends, and I thought that I would maybe wait like a month for this, but I don't know, the urge was too strong, so I just plowed through Normal People right after that video, and I even reread Conversations with Friends since last week, and I read Mr. Salary, so I am in the Sally Rooney mind space right now. So I think I've just finally become obsessed with Sally Rooney. I finally understand the hype surrounding her work. And yes, I will be rereading Beautiful World, Where Are You very soon. I just have a few books that I want to finish before the month ends. Now, in that Conversations with Friends video that I posted last week, that I will link up here somewhere, I mentioned how when I read Normal People before and when I watched the TV show, I wasn't blown away by them. I appreciated them. I could understand the talent of Sally Rooney in the novel and of the filmmakers on the TV show, but the story never fully impacted me. Rereads can often be hit or miss. I think rarely have I ever reread something and just completely changed my mind about it, but I always like to give books a second chance, a second or third chance sometimes, because I think that when we read books and the circumstances that we're in when we read those books do impact how we respond to them. And when I read this in 2019, I was definitely a much different person than who I am today. And ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that this was one of those rare occasions when I changed my mind upon reread. Whereas the last time I gave Normal People about 3 stars on Goodreads, upon reread, I am now giving it 4.5. I'm deducting the 0.5 just because while I did love it, I still feel Conversations with Friends is just, to me, a superior novel. So giving it the same 5-star rating as Conversations with Friends didn't really feel right. So I gave it 4.5, but ultimately I just absolutely loved this book. So just for a quick summary of what Normal People is about, in it we follow Marianne and Connell. They were both schoolmates when they were younger. They formed a unique friendship and bond when they were there. Marianne in school is sort of the very, very confident, at times proud person. She's a loner. She has a rough family life. Connell, on the other hand, has a lot of friends in school. He's a star athlete. He's super, super smart. He's good looking. And though he suffers from anxiety and caring too much about what people think about him, he still manages to enjoy his time in school. And the novel follows this unconventional relationship that Marianne and Connell form with each other over the course of 4 years through their time in school, like I said, and their time in university. And we see how their relationship inevitably changes through time, for better and for worse. And much like Conversations with Friends, Rooney just has this way of conveying inner thoughts and the inner life of characters in a way that makes me feel seen. I can't tell you how much I could relate to both Connell and Marianne. I think I would have seen myself as a Marianne in high school, kind of a loner. I have my select group of friends, but yeah, I had maybe an air of superiority that I think was more of a defense mechanism to make myself feel a little bit better about not having that many friends. And then once I got to college, I was a Connell in that I never felt like I fit in. I moved from sort of one tier of education, if you will, in high school to a higher one when I went to university. And yeah, I just never found my footing. I felt extremely anxious. And yeah, I felt like this book just captured those two times of my life so well. I mean, I'm obviously not exactly like Marianne or Connell, but I'm just in awe of how Rooney handled it with such honesty, and she was never judgmental about either character. She just let them live on the page and beyond it, because I feel like they exist and their lives absolutely continue beyond the pages of the book. I saw a review, I think either on Goodreads or on Amazon or something, where someone said that reading a Rooney book is like inhabiting the skin of the characters. Like you feel like you're wearing their skin and you're in their heads and you are those people. And that's exactly right. I'm always really captivated by how Rooney can work through emotions and feelings and do so honestly and through language that just feels so accurate. Whenever I read the inner monologues of these people, in this case Marianne and Connell, I always want to say like, that's exactly what it feels like. That's exactly what I feel. How are you able to articulate it so well? Like I wish I could speak like this, or think through things in this clear way. Reading her books just feels so personal and intimate. And yeah, I swear these people do exist. I really like that Rooney never feels the need to have her characters know exactly why they do or they don't do things. I found that to be really realistic. A lot of the times, Connell, while yes, he can articulate a lot of his thoughts, often he doesn't know why he made this decision. Sometimes he can't even articulate it to himself. So that balance, but also that contradiction, I think is very human. I thought the book also captured alienation and loneliness and mental health issues like anxiety and depression excellently. In Connell's case, it's when he's in university and he's struggling to participate in class, to make friends. We see how Connell responds to the culture clash of being in university with a bunch of pretty well off people. It seems like everyone is from the same region, they all have the same accent, they all vacation in this place, they all have big houses in that place, and he just is not from that background. And the narration is so witty and observational about these issues. I think some people think that maybe sometimes it can be a bit superficial, these commentaries on class and politics. And yeah, I can maybe see how they can be superficial, but I think that ultimately is intentional because, I mean, the characters are not supposed to be experts on these things. Often this is the first time that they themselves have fully realized this. So they don't have like big, well-researched philosophical statements to make about these things because they don't really know too much about it yet. They're young. So yeah, I can see the criticism, but I also don't fully agree with it. I can see the other side. It's also really interesting to get in Marianne's head because she can be so closed off to people, and she was a loner in her school days. Being in her head, I mean, it's a very sad space to be in, but I like how we get to learn more about her perspective with her family, how abusive her home life is when she's at home with her mom, who's very cold and sort of distant, and her brother, who is violent towards her. We can really see how broken she is as a person, and the connection that she makes with Connell is even more special because he's the only one who really values her as a human being. He can see beyond the gossip, and he takes time to get to know her, and that special bond is just really lovely and really heartbreaking and unique, and just it's so special. And though, yes, the novel does handle some really deep and dark subjects, like depression, like anxiety, like self-harm, like eating disorders, and all of these things, it it balances it really well with very witty dialogue and very funny scenes. There's a scene when Connell gets robbed and he goes to Marianne for some help and for some money, and he discovers that at that moment when he goes to see Marianne, that she had been in the middle of like a social gathering with her then very annoying boyfriend, and Connell just makes a joke about how like, well, actually, maybe getting punched in the face wasn't so bad. Let me just go back to that. Rooney just has a way of subverting the dark subject matter with like a really witty, funny line. And she does this throughout the novel. So it's not a wholly sad experience reading this book. It's quite enjoyable, it's very fast paced. I, for one, could not stop reading it. I devoured this in about 3 days. Now I know that maybe not so fast paced for some people. They can read this in one sitting, but I just love reading it so much that while I want to finish it right away, I don't want it to end right away. So I like try to pace myself as best as possible. But trust me, during those 3 days, I was just devouring it. I was just there, sitting, reading, and loving every second of it. I really appreciated the structure too. It flips back and forth between the present time and flashbacks, and there were chapters when the reader would actually know about the backstory of the character before the characters in the present would, and that just builds tension and suspense really, really well. I think one of the best examples of that is the scene between Connell and his former school teacher. She does something to him, and that scene plays out by cutting back to what that teacher did to Connell to the present when Connell is in therapy. So yeah, the way that that entire scene played out was, I thought, excellently done. I wouldn't say the book is absolutely perfect, even though I loved it so much. The more you read from one author, you could sort of pick up on some writing quirks that they have, and I think Rooney does have her go-to phrases and her go-to metaphors. There's a lot of times when characters, both in this book and in Conversation with Friends, feel like there's an imaginary world that exists outside of them that they're not a part of, and they don't ever think that they're gonna be able to see that other life. So there's a lot of that kind of imagery repeated. There are also repeated images of characters looking into mirrors and not being able to identify their features, like not recognizing themselves, and all the features looking blurred. There's also very little things like characters calling their parents by their first names, or just the recycling of certain names. In this book, you get Evelyn, who was one of the characters from Conversation with Friends. They're not the same character, but the name is reused, and likewise, the name Marianne was used in Conversation with Friends, and obviously Marianne is one of the protagonists here. Her characters are also all a similar sort of introverted type. They fidget a lot, and the fidgeting on the page often looks the same. I remember Frances in Conversations with Friends and Connell in this one. They like fidget with a piece of paper at one point when they're really nervous. They start folding it into little pieces. I guess sometimes when you're reading a novel, you kind of want the characters to be a little bit more individualistic. It would be interesting to see how anxiety can play out in a different way for Connell than it can for Frances. But again, none of these are huge issues. And also, I sort of wished that Marianne's storyline could have a little bit more closure. The way it plays out in the novel is that, she's really, really low, and then she gets back with Connell at the end, and suddenly she's feeling very, very good. And I just wanted a little bit more of a bridge between those two periods, because it's quite a stark contrast. So yeah, again, it sort of goes back to something I complimented about the novel, how characters don't necessarily need to know why they do certain things, but with such a big emotional beat and core to the storyline being Marianne's mental health and how she views herself in relation to other people. I feel like that could have been tied up a little bit neater. And in a similar way, I wished there was more time spent with Connell working through his depression. We see the scene with the therapist, and then like months later, when he seems to be on medication and is better. I wanted more of a what happened in between those two time periods kind of thing. But again, these are things that did not ruin my reading experience at all. It's just, I guess I'm a very picky reader, and yeah, there was a little bit of space where this could have been improved upon. But yeah, I gave it 4.5 out of 5. No huge complaints. This is a phenomenal book. So it was really interesting then, having now reread Normal People, to rewatch the series, also having just finished watching the other adaptation of another Rooney novel and finding a lot of flaws with that one. So once again, I tried to approach the series as objectively as possible, not trying to look for it to replicate 100% what happened in the novel. I know TV and film as media are very different from what novel and the written word can offer. They just occupy two different spaces that, yes, interlink, but have their own unique, important values. And the first thing that you really notice about the Normal People adaptation, at least that I did, that just sets the tone for the entire series and also gives me as a viewer the confidence that it'll match potentially the brilliance of the novel, is the superb, I mean superb casting all around. No, none of the actors necessarily looked exactly like the characters did in my head when I was reading them, but their interpretations of them were just spot on. Daisy Edgar Jones plays Mary Ann. So in the novel, Mary Ann, during her school days, is made fun of a lot for her looks. She's very thin, she has crooked teeth, she's just, I guess, not considered very pretty. We do, of course, have to take into consideration that Mary Ann thinks pretty low of herself physically, and also that the bullies in school might be acting out of a place of jealousy. Maybe they themselves don't actually think that she's ugly, but are just trying to provoke her in a way, or they just want to appear cool just to fit in. So taking that into consideration, I think Mary Ann as a character is not supposed to be like this glamazon, beautiful, absolutely stunning supermodel, right? So, you know, Daisy Edgar Jones, I can't imagine people making fun of Daisy in school for her looks. She's very beautiful. So at first sight, you know, the casting seems a little bit odd, but wow, like, she was perfect as Mary Ann. She captured her inner life so well in a way that I thought was actually a little bit more nuanced than the book. The way that Daisy physically played Mary Ann too, you could just see how broken she was, from her posture to the way that she sort of recoiled whenever she was around her family, and you could really see the insecurity play out in her head, you know, and how she quickly thought of something meaner to say to people when they made fun of her. Like, you can tell that it originated just as a defense. Not really that she was so arrogant and loved making fun of people, but it was more like a response to the meanness being projected onto her. Not to justify bullying or being mean or anything. I just think that the portrayal of Marianne was so fantastic. And Paul Mescal, or however you pronounce his name, as Connell, wow. Yeah. I approve. He had this sort of rugged sensibility. He's extremely attractive. So I could easily believe that he would be popular in school. And I think, again, Paul, just like Daisy, just did a phenomenal job inhabiting the inner life of the character of Connell. I, for one, loved the juxtaposition of how Connell expressed himself in person with people and how supposedly he was so different in writing. It's something that I can relate to. I find that I'm a horrible speaker. I can feel more relaxed and more confident expressing myself through the written word. And yeah, I feel like that's very common amongst artists. I feel like often actors, dancers, other performers, other artists in general, in their work, they're super confident and free, but in their private life, they're not that at all. Sometimes they're shy, very introverted, not as expressive, not as spontaneous as their work may imply. So I thought that that translation of book Connell to TV show Connell was excellent as well. And I think the exploration of Connell's writing endeavors was more realistic in the TV show actually than in the book. Because in the book, we don't really see Connell writing all that much. He doesn't mention it until midway through university, basically, when he just has an idea and then writes a short story and it gets published in the university literary magazine. And this is the second time that a Rooney character has sort of not written for a while and then wrote one thing and it was so good that it was published. I find that rather unrealistic. Like, yes, on the rare occasion you'll have someone who just produces something of such a genius that is ready for publication right away, but I don't know, often I feel like writers just struggle and produce quite mediocre work for quite some time before they actually have something that's publishable. And so in the TV show, they include Connell from the beginning, sort of jotting things down. We could see that he he finds a way to express himself through journaling or something, but writing is there from the beginning. And then when he does have the confidence to sit down and write something, he sends it off to the magazine, but they reject him. And he has to keep working at it and working at it. So that TV show interpretation of the writing life is much more accurate to me than what the book portrayed. And that applies also to Conversations with Friends with Francis, who just like writes a short story and it's so fantastic that it just gets published. So yeah, somehow the TV show found a way to make that more believable, which I appreciated. Ashlyn McGuckin as Denise, who is Marianne's mother, was superb also. I really appreciate that the TV shows just give more room for the side characters to shine too. And I really appreciated that in the show they took Book Denise, who was a little bit flat, you know, she was very mean, she ignored Marianne and her needs, and didn't intervene when Alan, Marianne's brother, would be violent towards her. She would just sort of remove herself from the situation entirely. But the show, thankfully, gave her some room to try to communicate why exactly she was behaving this way. Maybe it wasn't said explicitly, but we can sort of gather that she's been affected by her own relationship with Marianne's father, who has passed, and how violent he was. It seems like her reacting to Marianne and Alan in the way that she does stems from, I don't know, like a detached coldness. She's almost suffering from the trauma herself and she doesn't want to get involved. I think Ashlyn makes Denise just an iota more sympathetic. Not entirely. It's awful that she doesn't protect Marianne better. But yeah, we can see a little bit more as to why she is the way she is in the TV show, which is excellent. And Sarah Green as Lorraine, Connell's mother, was fantastic. I remember the actress from the horrid Dublin murder series thing. Loved the books, hated that TV adaptation, yikes. But Sarah Green did a great job. They even gave her like a little dating storyline for a hot minute, but yeah, I loved her portrayal. I think she nailed it. TV show Lorraine came across as loving and understanding, but as confident and assured as book Lorraine. So yeah, great job. One thing that could be really difficult for adapting Sally Rooney books to the screen is that her books focus so much on characters' inner lives. A lot of it happens within their heads. So having that translate to film language doesn't always work. In my opinion, as it didn't work in Conversations with Friends, the TV show. However, I think that Normal People found a way to bring that inner monologue to exterior dialogue by doing that exactly. By taking things that the characters were saying to themselves in their head and giving them to either their character or other characters to say out loud in conversation. For example, in the novel, very early on, Marianne and her classmates go to see the school football game, and this is Gaelic football, I discovered, not soccer football, but like a different type of football. But anyway, while she's there, she's watching Connell play because he's on the team, and then she lingers on the image or the fantasy of him in bed with other people or with her, but all of this happens just in her head and she never tells anybody. In the TV show, they actually have Marianne tell Connell this while they're chatting in bed, which I think helps to emphasize just how close they are, how they're letting their guard down, how comfortable they feel being themselves around each other, and how that relationship between them is so unique and different from how they react to the world around them and to others in that world around them. And I think it was an important line to pick up on in Marianne's character to then extract and make dialogue. And they did this throughout, not just in that scene. And I think that's needed when, again, you have a novel that's so centered on people's thought processes. Yeah, great job in translating all of that into the screen. And I really liked the scene in the TV show and the novel when Marianne and Connell are in the pool together. It's right before the notorious summer breakup that they have due to miscommunication. In the book, Connell has this moment where he's looking out and he says to Marianne something like, "Can you believe this is real life?" and Marianne doesn't really know how to interpret this, whether it's in praise of how happy and fun everything around them looks, or in a sort of disparaging way, like, ugh, can you believe this is real life? She never knows because Connell just keeps it in his head. And I think the show does a really great job of translating in that moment what is in Connell's head visually, through the music, through shots of Connell looking at other people laughing and having fun, and to shots of his face just in awe of all this happiness around him. One thing that I mentioned in the Conversations with Friends review of the TV show that I didn't totally love was how the show portrayed these sex scenes. Normal people knew exactly how to treat the sex scenes. It did linger on how the characters interacted with each other in the moment, how they navigated that intimacy. Normal people should have been the model of what to do, but they seem to have abandoned it a little bit for the other series. But yeah, Normal People TV show, great job in just translating how Marianne and Connell are opening up to each other in these moments. The only thing that I wished they hadn't changed for the TV show was the way that they portrayed Connell's sexual assault by the teacher. And it's not to say that I wanted more sexual abuse in the TV show. Obviously, no. But I think that was a really important moment to just demonstrate how men too are assaulted and can be victims. And it's an interesting comparison to make between what happens to Connell and what happens to Marianne earlier on when she's selling the raffle tickets for the Debs. So it's a sad parallel moment. I think the show sort of tried to downplay what happened to Connell. Yeah, so I just thought it was a missed opportunity to make like a really important point. And another small annoying thing was when the characters are in Italy on vacation, they make Marianne and Connell go out to buy groceries, which was a little too reminiscent of what happened in Conversations with Friends. I understand that for the purposes of the story, they want those two characters to be isolated, to interact with each other, to have time to speak to one another without the other people around them. So as a device, I get it. It just seemed like it was lifted from one story and placed into the other when it didn't need to be. And yes, those are all of my thoughts of the book, Normal People, and the TV show, Normal People. Let me know what you guys think. Did you love it as much as me? Did you have problems with it? How do you feel it compares to Conversations with Friends, both the novel and the TV show? I would love to know what all of you guys have to say. Thank you all for watching once again. Like, comment, and subscribe if you choose to do so. And yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye.